twin alien girls waited in the same corner for 7 days for the human who promised to return. The rain had been falling since morning, fine, steady without pause. It collected on the glass plates of Pearl Causeway, dripping through the seams into narrow drains that hummed beneath the walkway. The promenade stretched across the ocean like a long, glowing artery connecting the upper districts of North Irith Spire. From a distance, it looked clean and ordered. Up close, it smelled of wet steel, ozone, and salt. Rowan Hale moved through the crowd with the quiet focus of someone who had learned not to waste motion. He worked for the Harbor Mapping Division, one of the last government offices still run by humans instead of automated nodes. His job was simple in theory: walk the bridges, check the vent lantern readings, and keep the flow maps accurate. In reality, it meant long hours alone above the ocean, a shoulder always tense from carrying gear, and a mind trained to read small details others ignored. He was 36, former scout from the old coastal militia before automation made scouts obsolete. The years had left their mark. Lines near his eyes, a habit of scanning exits even when off duty. He preferred silence, but silence in the Spire was rare. There was always some hum. Vent turbines, crowd chatter, the buzz of commerce. He was 3 hours into his inspection route when he noticed the sandals. 2 pairs, small, worn thin at the soles, tied together at the straps, and set neatly side by side against the tile seam. It was the precision that caught him, the symmetry. People in the Spire didn't do things symmetrically unless it meant something. He looked up. 2 children sat just beyond the line. Blue-skinned, maybe 5 years old. Long white hair tied in braids that reached their shoulders, threaded with copper wire. Their knees were pulled to their chests. Thin, translucent shawls clung to their arms. Algae silk, the kind vendors handed out at ferry terminals. No adult in sight. No shelter. Just the 2 of them, sitting in the steady drizzle while hundreds of people walked past without a glance. Rowan stopped. He scanned the area automatically. Security drones overhead, merchants closing their stalls, a distant hum from a dock elevator. No sign of distress calls. Nobody stopping. His stomach tightened with the kind of unease that came from knowing what the city ignored. He crouched down to their level. The motion triggered old muscle memory. Balanced, alert, one knee down, weight distributed. His jacket darkened from the rain. "Hey," he said quietly. "You two all right?" The smaller one, Senna, though he didn't know her name yet, didn't answer. She just looked up with glassy blue eyes that reflected the lantern light. The older one, Nairai, watched him like she was trying to decide if he was real. Rowan reached into his pack and unwrapped a packet of Varenflake flatbread. The smell of warm salt and oil spread into the damp air. He set it down between them, followed by a small flask of Furlan seed coffee mixed with seafoam milk. "Eat first," he said. They hesitated. When Nairai finally picked up a piece, Senna mirrored her exactly. Their movements were slow, careful, synchronized in a way that wasn't learned. It was survival. After a minute, Rowan spoke again. "Where's your adult?" Nairai traced her finger along the seam between tiles. "She went to the work gate. They said she needed a bond letter. She told us to wait here." "How long ago?" "Morning." Rowan glanced at the skylights. It was almost late afternoon. He looked back at them. "You've been here all day?" Senna nodded. "We can't move. It breaks the line." He frowned slightly. "The line." Nairai pointed at the seam beneath their feet. "The promised line. We stay on it until she comes back." Rowan's chest tightened. He'd heard of it, an old coastal belief carried into the Spire by migrants. You stood on a marked line and waited for a promise to be kept. Breaking it meant dishonor. He asked softly, "Who made the promise?" Senna's small hand rose, pointing at him. Rowan froze. "Me," he said. She nodded. "You said you'd bring someone to help." So we waited. He searched his memory. Earlier that morning, during his survey route, he had passed this same corner. He'd seen 2 small figures and thought they were lost. He'd knelt, asked if they were waiting for someone. They'd said their guardian had gone to the gates. He'd told them, "Stay here. I'll bring help." Then the signal from a harbor had come through about a faulty intake reading, and he'd moved on, promising himself he'd circle back later. He hadn't realized they'd taken it literally. Rowan let out a slow breath, guilt cutting through him like static. He could have brushed it off, walked away, but something about the way they sat, small, soaked, unflinching, made that impossible. He stood. "All right, stay here. I'll find her." He turned and moved fast through the thinning crowd. His mind shifted into mission mode, pattern analysis, spatial recall. The gate sectors were 4 blocks east. He navigated the corridors, passing clerks, vendors, a line of tired workers scanning wristbands for entry. At gate 7, he spotted her, a woman arguing with an intake clerk beneath a blue service light. She was tall, mid to late 20s, blue skin with a faint teal glow beneath the wet surface. Her hair, black with a sheen like oil, was tied back in a simple knot. She wore layered work wraps and a worn market sash that crossed one shoulder, tied at her hip. The fabric clung from the rain, outlining a body built for endurance, not show. "Please," she said to the clerk, her voice low but steady. "They told me the bond letter was approved." "Backlog," the clerk muttered, scrolling a screen. "Textile domes 3 days behind." She pressed her palms on the counter. "I have children waiting. Then maybe find a bench." "Next." Rowan stepped forward. "Are you Ari Thalen?" Her head turned sharply. Her eyes, blue-green, sharp and clear, locked on him. "Who's asking?" "Rowan Hale. Mapping Division. I saw 2 girls waiting on Pearl Causeway. They said you told them not to move." Ari's breath caught. The clerk's voice blurred into background noise. "They're still there?" she asked. "Yes. Safe. Cold, but safe." She pushed past the desk without another word. Rowan followed. The walk back was silent, except for rain on glass. Ari's pace was fast but controlled. Her hands flexed occasionally, a nervous tell she didn't seem aware of. When they reached the corner, the twins were still there, curled together, holding hands, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion. The moment Ari came into view, they lifted their heads in perfect sync and whispered something only she could hear. She dropped her knees and pulled them close, one arm around each. Rowan watched from a few steps away, his chest loosened, tension draining out. He'd seen reunions before, families pulled from collapsed shelters, survivors located after storms, but this felt quieter, heavier. After a long minute, Ari looked up at him. "You came back." He nodded. "I said I would." Her expression softened for the first time. Then the line held. He didn't fully understand, but he returned her look with quiet respect. "There's a rest hall nearby, Citronich. You can stay there tonight. It's warm, secure." Ari hesitated. "You don't need to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." The 4 of them walked together through the mist. The twins clung to Ari's sash, their small sandals slapping softly against the tile. When they reached the rest hall, a wave of warm air met them. Rowan showed Ari how to set the door lock and the wake chime. "They'll let you stay 2 nights if you register early," he said. Ari nodded. "Thank you." He started to leave, but the twins tugged at his sleeve. Senna looked up. "You'll come back." Rowan crouched again, meeting her eyes. "I will," Naira added softly. "You promised." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep it." He left them with the sound of fizzing drinks and quiet laughter behind the door. As he stepped back onto the promenade, the city lights shifted to evening mode, cool blue against the wet glass. His comm buzzed with a new intake report. He ignored it for once. As he walked toward the transit hub, the thought stayed with him. How small the twins had looked against the vast structure of the spire, and how easily a promise could turn into a line someone might never cross again. He didn't know it yet, but that line was about to define everything that came next. Rowan didn't make it back the next morning. The city woke to alarms echoing across the upper promenade. Low, mechanical pulses that rolled through the glass corridors. At first, he thought it was another ventilation test, but when his comm lit red with a flashing seal icon, he knew it wasn't routine. A biosalt spill in one of the intake lines had triggered a full lockdown of Pearl Causeway. The Spire's custodial network rerouted all access to emergency response, and every certified mapper was pulled into the cordon zone. Rowan was one of them. He didn't argue. People depended on those vent intakes. One miscalculated salinity gradient could flood the entire lower level. Duty came first. That was how he'd survived the militia and how he justified most of his choices since. But as the lockdown gates sealed behind him and his comm access was confiscated for audit, he thought of the twins. The image of their small hands clutching the seam haunted him while he unrolled maps across the cold glass table. He asked the custodial supervisor if he could send a message to a contact at the rest hall, just a note saying they were safe. The supervisor barely looked up from her tablet. "No personal transmissions during containment," she said. "Finish your section grid, Hale." So he did. For 7 days, he worked the containment floor, mapping salt spread, recalibrating pressure valves, correcting errors logged by drones that misread sensor data. The days blurred into shifts. The air stung his throat, heavy with saline dust. He slept on a rolled thermal blanket in the hallway between shifts, next to humming conduits that vibrated like a pulse under the floor. Every night, he pictured the corner on Pearl Causeway, the empty cups, the promised line, the twins waiting. He told himself Ari had probably found work, that she would have taken him somewhere safe. Still, guilt settled deep, persistent like grit in a wound. On the 4th day, while tightening his sensor clamp, his hand slipped and burned against the housing plate. The pain was sharp and fast. He wrapped it in mesh and kept working. The med tech offered to log it, but Rowan shook his head. "Finish the line first," he said. It wasn't pride, just habit. When the final inspection cleared and the gates lifted, he didn't wait for dismissal. He took his comm from the return bin, signed the clearance sheet without reading it, and left. His boots echoed on the long corridor, the sound hollow after a week of mechanical hum. The promenade was quieter than he remembered. The storm had passed, but the air carried that sterile, washed-clean smell of disinfectant and rain. He moved faster, almost running by the time he reached Pearl Causeway. His heart beat hard, not from exertion, but from something heavier. He saw them before he stopped running. The twins were still there, Nairai and Senna, standing side by side on the same seam. The rain had dried, but their clothes were stiff from salt and damp air. Someone had given them a strip of mica fiber to patch their torn shawls. Their small clay cups were stacked into a neat little tower beside them. They looked thinner, pale from cold, but when they saw him, their eyes widened in something close to disbelief. Rowan slowed, his throat tight. He dropped to one knee in front of them. "I'm late," he said quietly. "I promised. I'm here." Nairai's lip trembled, but she didn't cry. "We thought you broke the line." Senna took his burned hand, inspecting it carefully. "Your hand hurts." He nodded, voice rough. "A little." Someone watched from nearby, the faint reflection of teal skin in the glass wall. Ari stepped forward from behind a tea stall, a shawl draped around her shoulders. Her eyes were sharper than before, not angry, but watchful. "I didn't stop them," she said. "They wanted to see if you'd come back." Rowan stood slowly. "You've been here the whole time?" "Close," she said. "The rest hall closed after 2 nights. They needed the beds for registered workers. We came back here because it was the only place they'd know where to find me." She looked exhausted. Her hair was still tied back, but her face was pale, skin dry from the salt wind. The twins leaned against her legs, and she rested a hand on each of their shoulders. Rowan took a steady breath, forcing his voice calm. "Come with me. I'll find somewhere else." Ari hesitated. "You don't have to." "I said I would," he interrupted. They followed him down the promenade, past Kos, shutting for the evening. The sky outside the dome had turned orange-gray, light refracting through the sea mist. They reached Opal Intake 4, a restricted zone where he still had contacts from his mapping work. Kessa, the intake foreman, was waiting near the rail, a thin woman with sharp eyes and oil stains on her sleeves. She raised an eyebrow when she saw the group. "Hale, thought you'd be sleeping for a week. Need a favor," he said. "Temporary shelter. 2 minors, 1 guardian. No records yet." Kessa glanced at the twins, then Ari, then back to him. "Who's the sponsor?" "I am." She studied him for a beat longer. "You're sure?" "Yes." Kessa sighed and tapped a command on her console. "All right, I can issue a caretaker waiver for 48 hours. But if security asks, they're under your mapping contract. You get me?" "Got it." They moved through the checkpoint quietly. Ari's hand tightened on the twins' shoulders when a guard scanned their wrists and frowned at the outdated hygiene bands. Rowan stepped forward before anyone spoke. Manual override. Temporary transfer. Form 9A. The guard hesitated. Rowan's tone was calm, authoritative, the way he used a sound when leading field units. The guard keyed in the override, the reader flashed green, and they were through. By the time they reached the service quarters, Aries' expression had changed. The guarded look had softened into something else, caution mixed with reluctant trust. Rowan keyed, opened the door to his bay apartment. It was narrow but clean, metal floors, a small cooking unit, 2 sleeping mats, and a window overlooking the green-lit ocean below. "You can stay here," he said. Aries glanced around the room, taking in the maps pinned to the wall and the half-assembled sensor kit on the counter. "This is your place. For now, it's ours," he said simply. The twins climbed onto the mats without waiting. Senna pressed her face to the pillow. Nairai tried to fight sleep, failed, and curled beside her sister. Rowan moved to the small stove, lit the burner, and heated water for tea. The scent of Corinne peel rose through the room, sharp and clean. Aries watched him quietly, her arms folded. "You worked all week?" she asked. He nodded. "Containment. They took my comm, I couldn't call." "I believe you," she said after a pause. "Most don't come back." He poured 2 cups. "I said I would." Her eyes softened a little. "Then you did right by them." He handed her the tea. Their fingers brushed, just a brief contact, enough to register warmth. Aries looked down at her cup, then at the twins, already breathing in slow, even rhythm. Rowan sat near the window, watching the reflection of the ocean light ripple across the floor. The tension that had held his chest for a week finally began to ease. The city outside hummed with the low sound of turbines and distant sirens. In that quiet, Aries spoke again, her voice low. "They call you what?" "Rowan," he said. She nodded slowly. "Then thank you, Rowan." He didn't answer. He just looked at the twins, 2 small figures sleeping without fear for the first time in days, and made a silent decision. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just fix their paperwork. He'd make sure they never had to wait on a promised line again. The morning light came thin and white through the small window, breaking against the metal frame of Rowan's apartment. The air smelled faintly of Corinne peel tea and reheated grain paste. Aries was awake first. She sat by the stove, cross-legged on the floor, repairing one of the twins' shawls with a narrow needle from her belt pouch. The girls were still asleep on the mats, curled together under a spare blanket, their white hair tangled like thread. Rowan moved quietly, setting the pan on the burner. He cracked 2 ration packs of reef bison meat and flattened them against the heat plate until the edges crisped. The scent filled the room, heavy and real. "You cook?" Aries asked without looking up. "Enough to survive," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's all any of us do." He poured her a cup of full seed coffee. Her hands were small but rough at the fingertips, the kind of roughness that came from textile work, handling damp threads, chemicals, heat. It was strange, he thought, how quickly the human mind noticed details once trust had space to exist. The twins stirred as the smell of meat reached them. Senna lifted her head first, her hair standing up in wild strands. Nairai blinked at the light and murmured, "Morning." "Morning," Rowan said, crouching beside them. "You eat before it gets cold." They sat up, rubbing their eyes. Aries tore pieces of the flatbread he'd saved from the night before and set them out like a small feast. It wasn't much, just meat, bread, and tea, but the twins ate with quiet focus, small hands working carefully to not waste crumbs. Rowan watched them and spoke softly to Aries. "How long have you been in the Spire?" 7 months, she said. "We came from the southern ports after the textile collapse. I had a work pass, temporary, but the renewal got lost when the dome systems switched to auto-screening. No bond letter, no records, no job. And once the bond letter request expires, you can't access the worker halls again." Rowan nodded. It explained the missing Guardian ID, the lack of wristbands. "You could apply through a field sponsor," he said. "It's slower but legal." Aries' voice dropped. "You'd have to declare the twins as dependents. That puts your name on our records." "I already gave my name to Kessa," he said. That part's done. She looked up from her sewing, eyes searching his. Why? You don't even know us. Rowan thought for a moment. The truth wasn't complicated. Because I said I'd help, he answered simply. Silence filled the room again, comfortable this time. The twins giggled quietly as Senna tried to balance her teacup on her palm. Nairai caught it before it fell and whispered, "You'll spill again." Their small voices lightened the space, and even Ari allowed herself to laugh softly. After breakfast, Rowan set his map case on the table and unrolled a grid of the lower promenade. His burned hand was still bandaged, but he worked as if the pain didn't matter. If we register your bond letter through Opal Intake 4, he said, we can bypass the textile dome entirely. I'll vouch the mapping contract as partial sponsorship. Ari hesitated. That's not exactly allowed. It's not forbidden either, he said. It's just paperwork and patience. She exhaled, torn between caution and hope. And after that, then you and the twins get clean records, safe housing rights, and access to food rations. He looked at her. You stop waiting on corners. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes flicked toward the twins, then back to him. You talk like you've done this before. He nodded. Once. Years ago, a mining crew lost their clearance after a power breach. I helped them refile under a new sponsor chain. It worked. That answer seemed to settle something in her. She folded the mended shawl neatly, stood, and said, Then I'll go with you. They left the apartment an hour later. The spire had warmed under a filtered sunlight that made the glass streets glow pale gold. Workers filled the walkways, moving in quiet patterns. Uniforms, badges, tired eyes. The twins walked between Rowan and Ari, holding hands and counting each vent lantern they passed. At the Opal intake checkpoint, the clerk looked up from her console, unimpressed. Field registration again. Rowan presented his ID card. Rowan Hale, Harbor Mapping Division. Temporary caretaker request, 2 minors, 1 guardian. The clerk squinted at the data stream. Not standard protocol. Standard doesn't fit every case, Rowan said calmly. His tone wasn't aggressive. It was confident, steady. The kind of tone that came from command years, the kind that made people listen. The clerk sighed, keyed in the forms, and handed Ari a stylus. Sign under dependent verification. Ari's hand shook slightly as she wrote her name. When it was done, the system flashed green. The girls gasped quietly at the light. It meant approval. Senna whispered, Does that mean we can stay? Rowan smiled. It means you can walk anywhere without getting stopped. Nairai reached for his hand and held it, small fingers curling around his palm. Thank you, Baba. He froze, caught off guard. Ari looked up sharply at the word, her expression unreadable. Nairai didn't seem to notice the tension. She only smiled, proud of her new word. Rowan cleared his throat. You don't have to. But Ari interrupted softly. Let her. She's choosing who she trusts. He looked at Ari then, really looked, saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the faint shimmer of salt on her skin, the strength beneath it. She wasn't asking for protection. She was testing if he'd run when things got complicated. He didn't. That evening, he brought them to the upper promenade near Lantern Court. The air smelled of sea vapor and fried root oil from nearby vendors. The twins ran ahead, chasing the shifting glow of the vent lights on the floor. Ari stood beside him at the railing, arms crossed against the wind. You had someone once, she said quietly. Before the spire. Rowan's jaw tightened. Yes. What happened? She wanted quiet, he said after a long pause. I only knew how to survive. I think that was the difference. Ari nodded, eyes following the twins. Survival isn't enough for children. I'm starting to understand that, he said. The wind pushed her hair loose across her shoulder. She turned slightly toward him. If we stay, I can work again. I sew fast. The girls can learn. You don't owe us anything, Rowan. I know, he said, looking at her directly. But I'm not leaving you to wait on another line. She didn't answer. She just reached out and adjusted the edge of his bandage where it had come loose, her fingers steady and warm. Below them, the ocean lights pulsed through the glass, green and blue. The twins laughed as they tried to match their steps to the flickering rhythm of the lanterns. For the first time since the day he met them, Rowan let himself believe they were safe. Inside that belief, something shifted, quiet, simple, irreversible. He wasn't just keeping a promise anymore. He was becoming part of the line himself. The next morning, a pale green fog rolled through the lower promenade as the vent filters began their weekly cycle. From the balcony of Lantern Court, the light looked almost like sea mist trapped inside glass. Rowan leaned against the railing, watching the glow ripple underfoot while the city slowly woke around him. Ari was already up, folding clothes she'd washed the night before and laying them neatly across the heater rail. The twins were still asleep, small shapes under the blanket, their hair spread like silver thread on the mats. For the first time in months, the apartment felt alive. There were the soft sounds of movement, the quiet rhythm of breathing, the smell of dried tea and cooked grain. Rowan found himself listening for those small noises each morning, proof that he hadn't imagined any of it. He turned from the window. "We'll need to check the bond letter confirmation today," he said. "The intake office opens at 9. Ari nodded without looking up. "I know. I already packed the forms." She spoke calmly, but there was tension in her shoulders, the same quiet caution he'd seen in her since the registration. The relief of approval hadn't erased months of distrust. The city had taught her that safety could vanish overnight. He stepped closer. "You don't have to keep watching the door," he said quietly. She straightened, caught. Force of habit. He studied her for a moment, then decided not to push further. Instead, he crossed to the stove, lit the burner, and dropped slices of reef bison meat onto the hot plate. The twins woke to the smell, blinking and stretching. Senna rolled over and mumbled, "It's meat again." "Best start to a day," Rowan said. Nairai sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Do we get to go outside today?" "Yes," Aries said, smiling faintly. "We have errands to run. You'll walk with us, and you'll keep your wristbands visible." The twins nodded, proud of their new silver bands. Rowan watched them as they ate, still too thin, but stronger now. They'd learned to talk more freely, filling the silences with small questions that reminded him of things he'd forgotten about himself. By the time they left the apartment, the spire had shifted into full motion. Vendors called out offers along the upper walkway, pushing carts of polished root and steaming fruit. The air smelled faintly of brine and metal. Rowan kept to the side of the stream, one hand lightly guiding the twins forward. Ari walked beside him, her sash tied neatly at her hip, her hair still damp from washing. At the intake office, the line was long, mostly workers renewing permits or claiming dormitory spaces. Rowan motioned for Ari and the twins to sit on the low bench while he handled the counter. When he reached the front, a clerk with tired eyes scanned his credentials. "Rowan Hale, Harbor Mapping Division. You're here for a field verification." "Bond letter confirmation," Rowan said, sliding the signed forms across the desk. "Guardian Ari Thalen, Dependents Nairai and Senna Thalen." The clerk nodded mechanically, then frowned. "You've attached them to a temporary mapping contract." "That's right. Authorized under Section 42, Field Sponsorship for Dependents in Transit." The clerk hesitated, clearly unfamiliar with the regulation. "That's usually used for refugees, not local workers." Rowan met his gaze. "They qualify." The man hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. The system doesn't argue with valid codes. You'll get final confirmation by end of day." He stamped the papers and slid them back. "Until then, they're officially under your protection." When Rowan returned to the bench, Ari's eyes met his immediately. "Well," he handed her the papers. "Temporary clearance granted. Full approval tonight." Her relief was subtle. Just a small exhale, her posture easing a little. The twins clapped their hands quietly when she told them they were now official. For them, that meant something simple. No more running, no more hiding when patrols walked by. As they left the building, Ari asked, "What happens after the confirmation?" "You'll get access to housing records," Rowan said. "If you want to stay here, I can move to a bigger unit. If you'd rather live near the textile dome, I can help arrange that too." Ari glanced sideways. "You talk like someone planning a long future." He didn't answer right away. "I've been in Spire 9 years, he said finally. "I've seen what happens when people stop planning. It's not living, it's waiting, They walked for a while in silence. The twins ran ahead, playing their counting game, matching their steps to the numbered vent lanterns embedded in the glass. 21, 20. Senna's voice echoed faintly through the corridor. Eri watched them, smiling without realizing it. They've never had this kind of peace before, she said softly. When the textile docks shut down, people left their children behind at the ferry ports. The twins remember that. They don't talk about it, but it stays in their eyes. Rowan nodded. They look forward now. That's enough. When they reached the market square, Eri stopped at a vendor stall displaying fabric rolls in shades of amber and violet. The merchant recognized her immediately. Back again, Thalen? Thought you left for the coast. Not this time, she said, running her hand over a strip of deep red cloth. I found work. The vendor smiled knowingly. Her work found you. Rowan waited nearby, watching her choose the fabric. He realized then that he hadn't seen her in color before. Not really. She'd always been wrapped in dull gray or work sashes bleached by rain. Now, with the sunlight refracting through the dome, the red fabric threw a warm reflection across her skin. She turned, caught him staring, and said evenly, "It's for a new sash. A clean start." He nodded once. "It suits you." They ate lunch at a small stall overlooking the sea vents, fried quillfish strips and Zyron rice wrapped in bread leaves. The twins shared from a single bowl, laughing when the sauce dripped down their wrists. Eri wiped their hands with a folded cloth, smiling in quiet exhaustion. Rowan leaned back in his chair, watching them, then said, "You should rest after this. You've done more in a week than most people do in a month." Eri shook her head. "If I stop moving, I start thinking." "About what?" "About how close we came to disappearing," she said. "How small the line between survival and nothing really is." He didn't have an answer for that. He just reached across the table, slid the last piece of fish toward her plate, and said, "Then eat. It's better than thinking." She gave a quiet laugh, the first one that sounded unguarded. "You have strange advice, Rowan Hale." "It works," he said. That evening, they walked back home under the amber glow of the vent lights. The twins were half asleep by the time they reached the apartment. Eri carried one. Rowan carried the other. When they laid the girls down, Senna murmured, "Are we staying here forever?" Rowan looked at Eri before answering. "As long as you want to." Eri brushed a strand of hair from Senna's forehead. "Then yes," she said softly. "Forever." After the girls drifted off, Eri sat by the window, the newly bought red cloth folded across her lap. She ran her fingers along its edge, thinking, if the bond letter clears tonight, what happens to you? "I'll still be your sponsor," Rowan said, tightening the bandage on his hand. "That doesn't end unless I cancel it." She tilted her head. "You won't." "No." There was a pause. The room was quiet except for the hum of the vents and the sound of rain starting again outside. Eri looked at him steadily. "Why do you do this, Rowan? You could live alone and answer to no one. But you choose this." He thought for a moment, eyes on the window. "Because I got used to silence. Then I realized it wasn't peace. It was just the absence of anyone who needed me." She watched him for a long time, her expression softening. Then maybe it's time someone did. He met her gaze. No words this time, just a shared understanding. Outside, the city lights flickered through the fog, painting their faces in alternating hues of gold and blue. It wasn't a confession. Not yet. But something had changed in the air between them. No longer obligation, no longer a debt. It was belonging. And neither of them wanted to name it too soon, afraid it might vanish if they did. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a thin film of moisture on the glass railings. The spire's air smelled cleaner than usual, touched with salt and the faint sweetness of vent lantern fuel. Rowan stepped out of the apartment early, checked the status panel outside the door, and saw the confirmation, bond letter approved. He allowed himself a small, quiet breath before going back inside. The twins were sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing patterns with steam on the fogged window. Eri stood at the counter, tying her new red sash with careful precision. The color was deep, almost glowing against her blue skin. "It's official," Rowan said, holding up the slate. "You're registered. All three of you." Eri turned. For a second, she didn't speak, just pressed her lips together, absorbing what it meant. Then she exhaled. So we exist again. You never stopped existing, he said, walking closer. Now the city finally admits it. The twins looked up at the word official like it was something magical. Senna whispered, "Does that mean we can stay here forever?" Rowan crouched beside her. Yes. No more moving. No more waiting on the line. Nairai grinned and threw her arms around his neck. Baba kept the promise. Eri froze at the word again, but this time her face softened instead of tensing. She didn't correct them. They spent the morning cleaning the apartment, an unspoken ritual of making the place truly theirs. Rowan scrubbed the window seals and repaired the stove hinge. Eri rearranged the storage drawers and folded the bedding with methodical neatness. The twins helped by sweeping dust into tiny piles, though most of it ended up under their feet again. At midday, Rowan cooked reef bison meat again, diced and seasoned with ground saltroot and a dash of pepper oil. He boiled Varan flatbread until it softened, layered it with meat and Draxon mushrooms, and handed plates around the small table. Eri watched him as she ate. "You handle food like a soldier," she said. "I was one," he admitted, surprising even himself by saying it aloud. Her eyes lifted, curious. "You mentioned training before, but not what kind." "Reconnaissance," he said simply. "Old militia units before the trade reforms. When the coast fell, they shut us down. I stayed on contract work, mapping, logistics, whatever kept me moving. And now you stay still," she said almost gently. He looked at her. "I'm learning how." The twins interrupted the silence by stacking their cups again, trying to build the highest tower before it toppled. Senna laughed when it fell over, and Eri shook her head with a smile that looked like the first real one he'd seen from her. After lunch, he took them out into the lower district to show them where the lantern numbers changed. The twins ran ahead, counting aloud while Eri followed slowly beside him. She carried a small cloth bag slung across her shoulder, the one that used to hold her work tools. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Jasper Lantern Court," he said. "They're holding the evening market. Thought you could look for proper clothes for the girls." Her brows rose. "That's the upper promenade. They don't usually welcome us there." "They will today," he said with quiet certainty. The court was crowded by late afternoon. Rows of fabric stalls, food vendors, and small kiosks glowing under soft amber lamps. The atmosphere was different here, less desperate, more alive. People laughed, argued, bargained. The twins were dazzled. Eri paused at a clothing stall lined with folded wraps and scarves. The merchant, a gray-skinned woman with metallic eyes, gave her a neutral glance, then looked at Rowan. "You buying for your family?" Rowan nodded. "Yes." The merchant didn't question further. "Try the cloud weave," she said, pulling down a set of soft blue wraps. "Light doesn't tear easy. Perfect for kids." The twins ran their hands over the fabric, giggling. Eri's expression changed when she touched it. It had been years since she'd handled good material. "Too fine," she said under her breath. "It's just cloth," Rowan said. "You earned better than what you had." She hesitated, but didn't argue. They left the court just as the lanterns flickered on for night. The twins carried their new wraps folded neatly in their arms. Eri walked silently, the red sash at her waist moving in the wind like a quiet flame. When they reached home, the apartment felt warmer, almost lived in. Rowan checked the vent seals and set the small heater low. Eri unpacked their purchases and folded the cloth carefully onto the shelf. The twins changed into their new wraps immediately and began spinning around the small room, laughing. Eri watched them, half smiling, half worried. "They'll ruin them before morning," she said. "Then we'll fix them," Rowan said. "That's what homes are for, fixing things that break." He said it lightly, but Eri caught the tone. Her gaze lingered on him, searching for something unspoken. "You talk like you've done this before," she said. "I haven't," he admitted. "Not like this." For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the twins' laughter echoing softly in the narrow room. Later that night, after the girls fell asleep, Eri sat by the window, her knees drawn up. She looked out over the sea lights below. Rowan stood nearby, drying a cup with a cloth. "They'll start asking soon," she said quietly. "About what? About where they came from. Why they don't remember their father." Rowan leaned against the wall. "What will you tell them?" "The truth," she said. that he left before they were born. He didn't want them. I tell it plainly, so they don't imagine something better. He nodded. That's fair. She looked at him. And you? Why were you alone all this time? He hesitated. Because it was easier than losing again. Her eyes softened. You already lost someone. He didn't confirm it, but the silence said enough. Ari turned back to the window. You don't need to carry us to make up for that. I'm not, he said quietly. This is different. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, she reached for his bandaged hand. Her fingers brushed the healed skin where the burn had been. It's better, she murmured. Mostly. She looked up, her face close to his now. You never stop working, do you? Stops don't hold, he said, voice low. Something passed between them then. Not words, not yet, but understanding. She let go of his hand slowly and stood, the red sash swaying as she moved. Good night, Rowan. Good night, Ari. When the lights dimmed and the hum of the vents filled the quiet, he stayed standing there, staring at the closed door to the room where she slept. He didn't know when it had started, this feeling of belonging, but it was stronger tonight than ever before. The twins murmured softly in their sleep. Outside, the city lights pulsed in even rhythm, a heartbeat of glass and water. For the first time in years, Rowan didn't feel like a visitor in his own life. He felt anchored, and that terrified him more than anything else ever had. The rain returned 3 days later, steady and cold, tapping against the glass walls like static. Rowan woke before dawn, the same way he always had. Silence first, then breath, then movement. But now, when he stood, he saw 2 small bodies asleep at the foot of the bed and a third shape, curled near the window. Ari had fallen asleep, sitting upright, her head resting against the frame, her red sash draped over her lap like a blanket. For a long moment, he didn't move. The image didn't look fragile. It looked real. He brewed tea quietly, the smell of Corinne peel drifting through the small space. When Ari stirred awake, she blinked against the light and rubbed her neck. What time is it? Early, he said. The docks are still closed. She nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest. I used to like this hour, before work started, before everything fell apart. Rowan sat opposite her. You've never told me what happened. She hesitated. Then she spoke, not defensively, not guarded, just tired of carrying it. Before we came here, I worked at the textile dome near Veritha's Pier. I wasn't alone. I was married. Her hands tightened slightly. He was human, merchant from the supply barges. Not cruel, not kind, just a man who liked the idea of having someone waiting for him. When the company shut down, he left with the last shipment. No message, no credits left behind. Rowan listened without interrupting. I was pregnant, she continued. The twins were born 2 months later. The hospital registered them under my name only. That made things harder. No bond letter, no sponsor, no state housing. I begged at the intake gates. They said to come back with proof of employment, but no one hires a mother with 2 newborns and no address. She looked down at her hands. We lived under the ferry overpass for a while. I sewed repairs for dock workers. When the southern flood hit, we had to run. The twins were only 3. I thought coming here, North Irith, would fix it. Instead, the same gates, the same rules. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. They don't remember the worst of it. I'm grateful for that. Rowan's jaw flexed. He said nothing for a moment, then quietly, You survived all of it alone. I didn't have a choice. You had won, he said, meeting her eyes. You could have stopped trying. You didn't. Ari looked at him. Really looked. It was the first time she didn't seem afraid to let him see how much it had cost her. Behind them, Nairai stirred half asleep. Mom! Ari turned instantly, voice soft. I'm here. Senna blinked awake next, clutching the blanket. Is it morning? Almost, Rowan said. The girls climbed up, still drowsy, and leaned against Ari's sides. She held them both with an instinct that came from years of exhaustion and love mixed together. Rowan felt something shift inside him, familiar, dangerous, grounding. He turned toward the stove before it could show on his face. He cracked more reef bison meat into the pan, added seasoning, stirred with calm, steady motions. The hiss of oil filled the silence. The twins giggled when he flicked a bit of spice into the air. Aerie smiled faintly. They've never eaten like this before. They will now, he said simply. Later that afternoon, he took them all to the lower markets again. The twins wanted to see the sea vents up close, the ones beneath the promenade where the warm air rose in columns. Rowan carried Senna on his shoulders and pointed out how each vent was numbered for mapping routes. Narration tried to count them, but kept losing track. Aerie watched him quietly. It struck her how naturally he fit among them, how he guided without controlling, how his eyes softened when the twins spoke. She hadn't seen that kind of steadiness in a long time. When they stopped for lunch at a small stall, Aerie finally asked, "Why did you join the militia?" Rowan looked up from his plate. "Because I thought structure meant purpose." "And did it?" "For a while," he said. "Then it just meant survival. We were told to map paths through collapse zones. No one said what happened to the people we left behind." He looked at her. "I got used to walking away from things." Aerie's gaze was steady, then stopped walking. He didn't answer, but the words stayed. That night, the twins fell asleep early, tired from the long walk. Rowan sat at the table with his maps spread out, half working, half pretending to. Aerie joined him, her hair still damp from the evening mist. She glanced at the sketches and lines. "You map every vent in this city?" "Everyone I can reach," he said. "People forget where the air comes from. Someone has to make sure it keeps flowing." "That's how you see people, too," she said quietly. "Like systems that need fixing." He smiled faintly. "Maybe." Aerie traced one of the lines with her finger. "And what about us? What are we in your map?" He met her eyes. "Not something I plan to leave behind." The silence between them was dense, but not uncomfortable. The hum of the vents, the soft breaths of the twins, the faint vibration of the ocean below, all of it filled the room with a kind of fragile peace. Aerie leaned back slightly. "I used to think humans were cold," she said. "You're not." "I used to think no one needed me," Rowan replied. "You changed that." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Aerie reached out, brushed her thumb over the edge of his heel burn. "You don't hide pain well," she murmured. "Neither do you," he said, his voice low. The tension between them shifted, no longer uncertain but alive. Aerie didn't pull back. Her breathing slowed. "If I let myself rest," she said, "will you still be here tomorrow?" "Yes," Rowan said. "Every day after that." She nodded once, quiet acceptance in the gesture, and stood. Before walking toward the sleeping mats, she looked back over her shoulder, just enough to meet his eyes. "Then good night, Rowan." He watched her go, the red sash trailing softly behind her like a line drawn across the air. When the lights dimmed and the city faded into the low hum of night, he realized something had changed completely. He wasn't guarding them anymore. He was part of them. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in years, that didn't scare him at all. Morning light seeped through the window, pale and steady. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving faint streaks on the glass like traces of another world. Rowan stood at the small counter, fixing breakfast, reef bison again, sliced thinner this time, fried until crisp. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The quiet in the room had changed. It wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the stillness of a home before the day begins. Aerie stirred on the mat, her hair loose, the red sash now folded neatly beside her. The twins were tangled together, limbs and white hair sprawled across their shared blanket. When they smelled the food, Senna rolled over first, half mumbling, "Meat again." Narration giggled. "He always cooks meat." "Because you eat it," Rowan said, turning from the pan. "And because it keeps you strong." They sat cross-legged at the table, the girls on the bench, Aerie beside them. She sipped her tea slowly, watching Rowan move around the room with quiet precision. There was something in his posture that made her feel safe. The way he checked the stove twice, the way he always glanced toward the door before sitting down. After breakfast, the twins played by the window, counting ships that drifted far below the glass walkways. Aerie leaned against the wall, arms folded, studying Rowan. "You never told me why you came to this spire," she said softly. He looked at her, then at the sea beyond the glass. "After the militia disbanded, I took a mapping post at the southern docks. The company here offered double pay, for a relocation. I came because it was quiet, where I thought it would be. Were you running from something? He thought about it. From everything that wasn't my fault, but still felt like it was. The kind of guilt that doesn't leave even when you fix what caused it. She nodded slowly. I know that kind of guilt. They didn't speak for a while. The twins began humming softly, a sound that filled the silence like a thread of light. Later that day, Rowan took them all out into the city again. The spire's lower levels were alive with the weekly trade crowd. Vendors calling out, carts rolling, music from the street performers echoing through the corridors. The twins held hands and walked ahead, each wearing their new cloudweave wraps. Ari walked beside Rowan, her head uncovered now, the light glinting off her blue skin. As they crossed the Pearl Causeway, Ari slowed. She looked down at the tile seam where she'd first found the twins waiting 7 days in the cold. The line still ran through the walkway, faint but visible. Rowan stopped beside her. That's where it started. She nodded. They remember it. I try to make them forget, but I think it taught them what faith looks like. They learned that from you, he said. Her eyes met his. And they learned patience from you. He didn't answer, but his chest tightened. He remembered the exact moment he'd seen them there. Two tiny shapes against the city's indifference. He hadn't realized until now how much that moment had rewritten his entire life. They spent the afternoon in the upper promenade, visiting the Lantern District. The twins clapped each time a vent light flickered to a new color. Ari bought them small fruit cups, larnberry and Zyron peel mixed in honey water. The smell of sweetness and salt hung in the air. When evening came, the city dimmed for the lantern numbering festival. The walkway glowed gold beneath their feet. Music played from the upper balconies, and families leaned over railings to release light orbs into the air. Each orb drifted upward, catching in the dome light before fading. Rowan lifted Senna onto his shoulders so she could see. Nairai climbed into Ari's arms, resting her chin on her mother's shoulder. The lights reflected in their wide eyes, blue, gold, and green. They say each lantern marks a promise kept. Ari said, her voice barely above the music. Then maybe this one's for us, Rowan said quietly. The twins didn't understand the weight of his words, but they smiled anyway, clapping as another lantern rose. Later that night, back at the apartment, they set 2 small lanterns on the windowsill. The twins insisted on naming them, one Baba's Light and one Mama's. Rowan didn't correct them. Ari didn't either. When the girls fell asleep, Ari stayed by the window, watching the reflection of the floating lights below. Rowan joined her, arms crossed loosely, his voice low. They'll remember this night. They'll remember you, she said. He looked at her. You think so? Yes, she said. Because I will. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the vents and the soft rhythm of the twins' breathing. Ari turned toward him. The light from the lanterns traced across her face, softening her features. I don't know what happens next, she said. For once, that doesn't scare me. Rowan reached out, resting a hand lightly against her arm. You don't need to know. Just stay. She didn't pull away. I want to. He moved closer, slow and certain. The tension that had been building between them for days, unspoken, quiet, constant, finally broke the surface. Ari lifted her gaze to meet his. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was steady, grounded, the way he did everything. She exhaled against him, one hand rising to his chest. The world outside didn't vanish. It simply faded to a distant hum. When they finally pulled apart, she stayed close, forehead resting against his. 7 days, she whispered. That's how long they waited. And you still came back. I told them I would, he said. You did. She smiled softly, then kissed him again, gentle this time, almost grateful. The lanterns flickered once and steadied, their reflection dancing across the window glass. That night, the 4 of them slept under the same roof without fear. No guards, no permits, no lines to stand on. Just the sound of rain returning, light and even tapping against the glass as the spire drifted into its quiet rhythm again. For the first time in years, none of them were waiting for anything. The promise had finally been kept. The next morning dawned clear and quiet. The storm clouds had broken apart during the night, leaving thin white streaks across the dome above the city. For once, the spire wasn't humming with tension. The air felt lighter, the streets calmer. Rowan woke to the soft rustle of fabric and the smell of warm tea. Ari was at the counter, hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck, red sash draped over one shoulder. The twins were by the window again, building a tower out of their old cups, the same ones they had once stacked during the week they waited for him. Now, they were giggling, competing to see whose side of the tower could stay balanced longer. Rowan sat up, still half in a dream. For a moment, he simply watched them all, 3 lives moving in quiet rhythm inside a room that had once been just a place to sleep. It was a home now, though none of them had said the word aloud. Ari turned and noticed him watching. "You sleep like someone who hasn't in years," she said, pouring him a cup of tea. He took it, smiling faintly. "That's because I haven't. Not like this." She leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You look different, Rowan. Lighter." "Maybe I am," he said. "Or maybe the weight just feels shared now." She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth lifted. After breakfast, the twins dressed in their new cloud weave wraps, tugging at the edges proudly. They had begun to look healthy again, cheeks fuller, eyes bright. When they laughed, it no longer sounded like something they were afraid to lose. Rowan packed his map case out of habit, then hesitated. Ari caught the pause. "You're not going to the docks today?" He shook his head. "No, I put in for a leave request. Someone else can trace the vents for a while." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's not like you." He looked at her. "I know. That's the point." They left the apartment together, walking into the daylight that shimmered off the glass promenade. The city below was busy but not overwhelming. Workers laughed in the distance, vendors arranged crates of fruit, and somewhere, a child was singing off-key. The twins ran ahead, tracing the tile seams with their fingers, giggling when they remembered how long they'd once waited on one. "This is our line," Senna declared. "We can move now because we kept it." Rowan looked down at Ari, smiling. "They remember everything." Ari's voice softened. "They remember what matters." He noticed then that she was carrying her old work pouch, the same one she'd brought when he first met her, back when she still spoke like every word had to defend itself. "You're going back to the dome?" he asked. She nodded. "Part-time. Kessa helped me get a position with a small workshop. I can sew from home if I want. It's not much, but it's honest." "It's more than that," he said. "It's a beginning." She looked at him, steady. "You really think we'll get to keep this?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "We already have." They reached the outer ring of the promenade, where the ocean was visible through the glass below. The twins pressed their palms against it, squealing at the chill. Rowan crouched beside them. "See that current there?" He pointed to a swirling pattern of light beneath the surface. "That's what keeps the spire steady. Even when the waves hit, that current holds it in place." Narration nodded seriously. "Like promises." He looked at her, startled by how easily she'd said it. Exactly like that. As evening came, the city began its lantern closure ceremony. Rows of lights dimmed, one level at a time, until only the main causeway glowed faintly underfoot. Families gathered along the rails to watch the last lantern rise into the sky. It drifted slowly, its golden surface reflecting in the twins' eyes. Ari stood beside Rowan, arms folded against the cool wind. Her voice was quiet. "I used to hate this city. Now I think I could live here." "You already do," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, when you found us, did you know this would happen?" He shook his head. "No, I thought I was just keeping a promise. And now it feels like I was the one being found." Ari smiled, small, honest, tiring the way people are when they've finally stopped running. "Then maybe that's the line we both needed." The twins ran up to them, tugging at their hands. "It's starting. Look, Mama, look." They stood together as the final lantern ascended. It rose higher than the others, catching every shimmer of light from the city below. For once, there was no noise, no hum of turbines, no sound of rushing air, just stillness. Ari slipped her hand into Rowan's. He didn't look down, didn't move. He just held it, solid and sure, while the twins pressed against their sides, small and warm. When the light finally disappeared into the sky, Ari exhaled. "It's strange," she said. "I used to measure my days by what I'd lost. Now I count them by who's here." Rowan turned to her, his voice low. "Then we'll keep counting." Back at the apartment, the twins fell asleep almost instantly, curled together under their blanket. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the vents. Ari stood by the window again, looking out at the dark sea. Rowan came up behind her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You should rest too." She turned, met his eyes, and smiled faintly. "For once, I think I can." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, slow, deliberate, with the kind of tenderness that came from certainty, not impulse. Outside, the lights of North Irith Spire shimmered across the water. The city, indifferent and vast, kept breathing as it always had. But in one narrow apartment high above the ocean, there was warmth, laughter, and the sound of steady, peaceful sleep. The line had been kept. The promise had held. And for the first time, no one was waiting anymore.